All right, welcome everyone. It's been a while since we've done one of these. Lots of changes. As we know, the November real estate data just came out. A lot of changes in the macro picture. Lots of changes from policy side of things, especially with Bill 23. A lot of media attention has been surrounding that. So this is a perfect time for us to get all caught up. So welcome, and we're going to get right into it. All right, welcome back. Andy from Sweet Additions, where we focus on helping homeowners and investors create better homes and generate lasting wealth. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is look at GTA real estate prices. Okay, so this came in just a few days ago. So November numbers, we can see in this article here a total of 4,500 homes traded hands last month, down 49% on an annual basis, and minus 8.4% from October. Home prices dipped 7.2% year over year to an average of 1.079 million, though remained roughly flat on a monthly basis, down just 0.9%. Okay, so what are the big takeaways here? Sales activity down 49%. Okay, so that's huge. It's basically just no real estate activity. I mean, half of it has been cut down. Anyone in the real estate side of things, especially real estate agents and brokers, basically your the activity for those folks have been cut in half. Home prices down 7.2% year over year. Now that's no surprise given the where we were late last year to early this year, right? I mean, the market was just on a tear from sort of the latter half of 2021 to early part of 2022. So we can expect that that number is probably going to be even more pronounced in the coming months when things really got frothy around November, December, January, February of last year. So from a year-over-year perspective, those numbers are probably going to show double digits in the coming months. So we shouldn't necessarily be too surprised by that, and also be a little bit cautious with the headlines stating that real estate is down 20% or 15%, because we kind of expected that, right? A lot of those prices have already come down from that peak, back in January, February of this year. Now, the interesting number is the monthly basis, down only 0.9 or roughly 1% from October. Okay, so that may be an indication that there is somewhat of a floor in pricing due to the continued supply constraints. Okay, so let's look at the chart directly from the TREB site. Okay, so here's a summary, and I just like to look at the GTA just to kind of get a good overview. So the big number here, of course, is the number of sales transactions, just over 4,500, down from just under 9,000 last year, right? So around 50%. And of course, average price is 1.079 versus 1.162 from last November. And then new listings are just under 9,000 compared to just over 10,000 same time last year. Okay, so despite price declines, new listings are lower compared to last year. And this really just indicates that there's a lot of homeowners that are probably not desperate to sell. I mean, a lot of Canadians, I think the stat is approximately 1/3 of Canadians are mortgage free. So, they may be interested in selling a property, but given where things are with prices, they're not desperate. They're taking their homes off the market. We're seeing a lot of that. Okay. Now, if I had to make a prediction, and this is just my opinion, of course, prices are probably going to be flat for the next few months until maybe we see a big decline in economic activity, which may see more decline in prices. At that point, we might see the Bank of Canada step in, bring rates back down, assuming inflation comes down as well. Okay, so it's going to be very hard to predict what happens, but I do personally feel that a lot of the rate increases that happened over this year, the full effects of that have not been felt yet, and we're probably going to feel those recessionary pressures in the first half of next year. Okay, so we'll see how it goes, and one thing to kind of keep in mind is that housing supply constraints is a real concern. As you can see in this article here, the mandate is to bring in 500,000 new Canadians, permanent residents, and citizens, and this doesn't even include people that are on temporary visas, okay? Because those people need to be housed as well. So 400,000, which was the original mandate a couple years ago, that was already very high, and now the push is for 500,000. Where are we going to house these people? And I know we're going to get into Bill 23 and the mandate to build 1.5 million new homes. I'm going to share my opinion on what that's going to mean. But ultimately, housing supply is definitely a real issue in the GTA, in Ontario, and in Canada. Okay, so that's a very big picture thing. And so now let's kind of segue into discussing what happened with interest rates. Okay, so the Bank of Canada raises interest rates to 4.25% in what may be the last hike. Okay, so this is 0.5%. Many economists called for 0.5%, so they were correct. The market was pricing in 0.25%, before the actual raising of the rates this past Wednesday. And so, they were slightly on the hawkish side still. And I mean, it's really only 0.25%, but this goes to show that they're still slightly on the hawkish side. So they're not necessarily ready to pivot yet. This perhaps speaks to the fact that inflation is still high and that the job market is still strong. Okay, there's still lots of demand in the lower paying service sector jobs. Okay, which is why one of the reasons why they're trying to push for more immigration. So I mean, the central bank has two mandates, right? One is to keep inflation at their 2% target, and the other thing is for a strong job market. So the job market is still strong, but inflation is still high. So they're gonna try to keep doing that, but we're gonna talk about kind of their limits in a bit. Now, there are some anecdotal signs that many white-collar jobs and tech-related jobs are being shed. Okay, so in the past few weeks, we've seen some of the headlines, Meta or Facebook, whatever you want to call them, mass layoffs in Canada, less than a year after major expansion plans. Amazon layoffs hit Canadian teams, according to this article from November the 16th. Okay, so a lot of companies, and this is particularly true for tech companies that are relying on low interest rates. A lot of those companies are going to see pressure from them to reduce their staff on the higher pay scale. Okay, so a lot of management, director, executive level type of staff, you're probably going to see a lot of jobs being shed in that space, while we still see the service sector still having high demand for workers. Okay, so this is probably going to go into 2023. So we're going to see what happens. It's going to be very interesting. But the next few months, it's probably going to be slow going into the holiday season, going into early next year. And again, my personal opinion, and this could be wrong, I feel that a lot of the pressures that we've seen from the interest rate hikes this past year, that's going to translate to a lot of slow economic activity and bringing down inflation as well in the earlier part. Although I'm not really sure, I actually personally don't think that we're going to be able to hit the 2% target. At some point, I think they're going to have to raise that target to higher than 2%. All right, so now let's move on to discuss, actually before I do that, I kind of want to just go over the big picture, right? And I always like to look at the debt situation, okay? So this is my favorite website to look at every once in a while. So we're in Canada at 1.2 trillion in debt. Okay, so when it comes down to debt, it's really not just the individual, the household, and the business or the corporation. It also is at the government level, right? So the government, as we've talked about before, they issue bonds. So there are sovereign debt issues that the government themselves need to resolve. So these bonds get rolled over, and they mature, and the government themselves has to pay these debts. And if they don't have the money, eventually they're just gonna have to print it, right? And this number just keeps going up and up and up. Like the last time we looked at this, I think it was at 1.16 trillion a couple months ago, and now in Canada it's 1.2 trillion. So there's really no way for this to go down unless you're going to have an explosion in productivity, and that hasn't happened for the past decade, right? And if you look at the U.S., this is the more serious one, of course. In the U.S., it's over 31 trillion now, 31 and a half roughly. And then the bottom right here, the unfunded liabilities at 173 trillion dollars in the U.S. And this is all money that the government themselves owe to their citizens. You know, a lot of aging boomers, they were going to rely on Medicare and Social Security. There's no way that the government's going to default. They're just going to print more money. So at the end of the day, the debt is kind of part of the system. They need more debt. If they're not going to get the growth, they're not basically, the only other option is to print the money, right? And a lot of countries are not buying this debt as well. Okay, so now let's talk about the big news here in Ontario in the past week. Bill 23 was passed on November the 28th. Lots of controversy around this, especially from various municipalities and conservation authorities from the cities and towns because of potential reduced revenue from development charges, right? So a lot of cities are upset about that. And then also from conservation authorities, from concerns about overdevelopment and potentially expansion into the Greenbelt, even though that wasn't part of this bill. Now, if you go to the actual Government of Ontario website, news.ontario.ca, I do encourage you to go through and have a look at this. However, the information here is, it's kind of, they somewhat paint it in a nicer picture than what some of the details of it actually is. I still do encourage you to look at it because it is still factual. However, I have another site here that I recommend you go to as well. But at a high level, let's see, the key actions in this plan include freezing and reducing government fees to support the construction of new homes and reduce the cost of housing, particularly in the affordable housing and the non-for-profit housing side. Creating new attainable housing programs to drive the development of housing across the region of Ontario. That's a little bit vague. Increase the non-resident speculation tax to 25%, and then protecting new home buyers by increasing consumer protection measures and consulting on ways to help more renters become homeowners. So very interesting. You can actually go, if you scroll down to the More Homes Built Faster Act, you can get a little bit more detail about the items that I described. But the website that I came across, which was a law firm, Osler.com, they actually did a really good job of outlining some of the major points, and some of these are relevant to us as homeowners and small investors who are going to invest in property and add additional suites. How is this going to affect us? Okay, so a few things here on this website, and again, actually I'm going to provide all of these links on the description so you can go and check these out and read them on your own time. Third-party appeals no longer possible for the approval of minor variances or consents. Okay, so if you are a developer or a homeowner going in for a minor variance or consent to do something to your property, if you don't get approved, you can still appeal. But if you do get approved at the minor variance or consent stage, third parties can no longer appeal. Okay, so this is in favor of the developer and the homeowner that wants to do development on their property. Reduction or removal of fees for new construction, in particular rental and affordable housing. So in general, you're going to see a lot of development fees that are going to be removed for both small and large scale construction. And of course that's going to affect us because a lot of the projects that we're doing are probably going to be 4 units and under. Allowance of up to 3 units as of right on single family lots. Okay, so this policy change actually was already enacted in 2019 with Bill 108, the More Homes, More Choice Act. Although there wasn't as much media attention around it at that time with regards to multiple units on site, on one single family site. However, with this new bill, there's a lot more attention to it, and I think that this is going to accelerate many of the municipalities to revise their zoning bylaws as well as their official plans to make this happen faster, right? because there's still a lot of cities that are not fully on board with 3 units on a single family lot. Okay, so nothing has really fundamentally changed from the province side, but I think it will accelerate things with the municipalities. And then there's the removal of development charges for up to 3 units. Okay, a lot of those charges were actually not part of what we do. So when we add in second suites or garden suites, a lot of those development charges were removed already. But this clarifies potentially for things that are not accessory suites, but proper duplexes and proper triplexes. Back in the day, if you converted a single family or a 2-family dwelling to 3 units, you may be subject to development charges in excess of 5 figures. Whereas in the last few years and in the coming years, you're going to be exempt from that. So there may still be parkland dedication fees and certain types of fees that are going to be in the $1,000, $2,000 range, but it's not going to be crazy like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Okay. There's a bunch of other changes with respect to larger developments, but these items here that we outlined affect the small homeowner or investor the most. And really our whole philosophy is really not to get into the politics of it and whether it's a good or bad thing. Of course, I have my opinions about them, but I'm not necessarily going to dive deep into it. Really, it's about giving you the facts so that you understand what the policies are, what the changes are, and how can you navigate that for your own particular circumstance when you're putting in that additional suite or building that garden suite, or you want to convert your single family home to a triplex or fourplex. Okay, so we're going to talk about more about that for a couple of municipalities shortly. Okay, so now that we're done talking about Bill 23, there's another bill that was very controversial, which is to boost mayor powers, right? So they called it, I can't remember the name of the bill. Anyways, it's basically has to do with giving the mayors extra power to make decisions. So in the past, the requirement for the mayor was to get more than 50% of council support, whereas now, if they get a third of council support, the mayor can, they have the power to push through certain policies, even though in Toronto, Mayor Tory says that he's going to limit that type of power. We'll see how it goes, but most of when politicians have power, we know that they're going to use them, right? So now, what does this mean? So we know that this has passed. We've seen in the last mayor election that Tory had indicated that there was going to be some changes in terms of housing policy. So you can definitely, or you can most probably expect that some of these items are going to get pushed through, given that he has the extra powers now as well. Okay, so the first is commitment to eliminate and reform outdated planning rules that have prevented more missing middle housing type. So in Toronto, we know about the EHON program, expanding housing options, so what we've already talked about. But in addition to the additional suites, allowing a lot of mid-rise development as well. The second part of the plan would be the creation of a development and growth division at City Hall that would serve as a one-stop shop for developers. Okay, so hopefully streamline the process for people doing development, whether it's homeowners or whether it's small or large developers. And then the last item here, the third pillar would be to see council ask the province for authority to implement a use it or lose it standard for land owned by private developers, right? So we're seeing a lot of evidence of developers just, they got the approval to build, right? So they got site plan approval, and now they're potentially ready to proceed, and they may even have engineering and architectural plans in place, but they're not doing it. And a lot of that really has to do with the overall macroeconomic environment where interest rates are high. The project may have made sense 2 years ago when interest rates were still, the overnight rate was still near zero. Right now it's over 4%. So a lot of that really just has to do with business and them not being able to afford it. So I don't know if that's something that makes sense, but that's something that they're going to push for, so that if land is already ready to be developed, they were going to force developers to actually get started on the project. Okay, so we're going to see how that goes. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about are some of the new policy changes in the City of Toronto and Hamilton with regards to additional units. So the first thing is the City of Toronto. As we know, the Garden Suite policy was officially passed several months ago. We're working with several clients right now actively on those. And just wanted to present this tool for some of you who may not be familiar with it, which is the interactive zoning map for the City of Toronto. Now, as you can see, when you go into this this zoning map, again, the link's going to be in the descriptions. It's basically map.toronto.ca. You can see that everything's color-coded, and within the urban planning community, they call this whole yellow area the yellow belt, which is all low-rise residential single-family areas. And then you have these red areas, which are the high-density corridors, right? So the ongoing strategy is to allow for more densification, both in these high-density corridors, these red areas, as well as this yellow belt, okay? So this yellow belt are the single-family homes, detached, semi-detached, townhomes that they're going to be allowing people to build up to 4 units. Okay, so if you want to just kind of pull up any address here within the yellow belt area, if you kind of go into it and if you were to right click, actually not right click, if you're just to click on any property here, so randomly, what did I have here? 582 St. Clements Avenue. If you go into the bylaw section and you click that, then you're going to go directly into the residential detached zone description, and it's going to tell you what you can build there, right? So this hasn't been updated yet, but you can do secondary suite. It says a laneway suite, but it actually doesn't have a laneway in this particular property. But you can also, of course, do the garden suite. Now, it'll explain to you how many units you can actually build. Now, if you can build a second suite and a garden suite, it means you can build your a total of 3, right? So you have your main house, you have your second suite, most likely in the basement, and then you have your garden suite as well. Now, in some other zones, if I go back here, and these are in the higher density areas closer to the core of the city, right? If let's say I were to go on the east end of the city here, somewhere along the Danforth, you'll see that a lot of these houses are R zone. So R stands for residential, RD stands for residential detached, and RS stands for residential semi-detached. So the R zone areas, the residential areas, you can actually do potentially up to 4 units. You can do a main unit, and then you have 2 secondary suites, so 3 in total, and then a garden suite or a laneway house. So you can have up to 4 units. Okay. And the interesting thing about Toronto is that once you have a laneway house or a garden suite, all parking requirements are removed. The idea is that these are in high density corridors. It's public transit friendly. The only caveat is you need to have 2 bicycle parking spaces, which is definitely not going to be hard to achieve. Okay, so I just want to show you guys this tool, and a lot of you are already familiar with it, but you can go check it out. If you are in the City of Toronto and you are looking, you should find out what you can and cannot build. Now, something that's very interesting, I'm going to shift over here to the City of Hamilton. They recently just passed a bylaw to allow 4 units on a single family property. Okay, so this is actually outside of Bill 23. This is their own, within their own planning department. They're going to allow all of these residential zones to have their single family properties converted to up to 4 units. Okay, and the way that can be done is you can have a single family home converted to 3 units or 4 units, or you can have 3 units on the main home, and then you can do the garden suite. The garden suite itself cannot be cannot have 2 units. It has to be its own unit. Okay. Now, in some cases, you might be able to build a not technically a basement. They call it a cellar, but it very much functions like a basement. So you get double the square footage. But this is actually a really big policy, because there's a lot of properties that it's going to lend itself very well to doing 3 units, right? So if you had, let's say, a 2-story Victorian home, you can turn each level into its own unit plus the basement, and then you might have a detached garage that you can convert, or you might have a very large lot that you can build a nice additional garden suite. And the parking requirements, you are required to have parking for the main unit as well as for the 4th unit, But the second and third unit, you don't need to have the additional parking. Okay, so it's going to work very much like what duplexes used to require, which is the additional parking space. So if you can widen the driveway and you aren't subject to any obstructions like trees and fire hydrants, things like that, then it's fairly straightforward. Okay, so I can see this as a very good opportunity for homeowners and investors to add up to 4 units on their property. So you can go to this link here. Again, I'm going to provide the link, but you can just go to the City of Hamilton website and just type in residential zones project, and it's going to be detailed here. Where do I have it here? Modifications and updates to secondary dwelling units and secondary dwelling unit detached. So these are all the links to the units, and here we are. Changes to permissions to low density residential, and you can see here to introduce, so they're going to officially call these converted dwellings. So converted dwelling provisions to permit the conversion of existing single detached and duplex dwellings to family dwellings to contain a greater number of dwelling units, up to a maximum of 4 dwelling units on a lot. All right. Okay, so that was everything. Thanks for watching this, and yeah, a lot of changes that happened these past several months. We can see that there's going to be a lot more changes, not just in Hamilton and Toronto, but across other municipalities. We're going to try to cover more of that in the future for you guys. Apologies that we haven't been able to get these videos out lately, but we'll try to be more consistent with them. Thanks again for watching, and we're going to see you in the next video. Take care. Thank you so much for watching our video. We have a brand new garden suite guide, how to add one to your property. You can download a copy right now for free if you go to www.suiteadditions.com. We cover a ton of stuff you need to know if you want to start building these to create more housing and wealth at the same time. There's also a list of resources that we've identified that you can use. Download your copy now for free at www.suiteadditions.com.